In Viking lore stands a man both brilliant and cursed, Floki, the shipbuilder. Some believe he was guided by the gods. Others swear he was a mad trickster. Was he a true innovator who mastered the seas, or a legend born from myth? The sky hung heavy with black clouds, a shroud that pressed down upon the fjords of Norway. Wind screamed through the valleys like an angry god, tearing at the pine trees, bending them until they threatened to snap. On the shore, a Viking ship groaned under the torment of the storm. Waves struck it with the fury of Thor's hammer, shattering its frame and swallowing it into the dark sea. Men screamed, their voices lost to the howl of the storm. And yet, among the chaos, there stood one man watching not with terror, but with something close to wonder. His eyes were wide, unblinking, as if the destruction was a secret whispered only for him. This man was Floki. To many, he was touched by the gods, blessed with visions no other dared to dream. To others, he was cursed, his soul marked by Loki the trickster, destined to bring chaos wherever he walked. No one could decide whether Floki was the savior of the Vikings or their doom. But in that moment, as the sea devoured another ship, he smiled. For where others saw disaster, he saw a challenge, a riddle that demanded to be solved. The Viking age was an age of hunger. Hunger for land, hunger for wealth, hunger for glory. From their icy homes, the Northmen gazed outward, to rich kingdoms across the sea, and they longed to take what they believed the gods had denied them. But desire alone could not carry them. They needed ships stronger, faster, alive with the breath of both wind and warrior. A Viking without a ship was a wolf without teeth. And so, the fate of entire clans rested on the shoulders of men who worked with wood and iron, men who shaped the very bones of the sea. It was into this world that Floki stepped, barefoot on the damp earth, hands black with tar, eyes burning with a light that unsettled even his closest kin. He was no ordinary craftsman. He would run his hands along the grain of wood as if feeling the pulse of a living creature. He whispered to the trees before cutting them, laughing in strange tones as if he had heard their replies. Some swore he carved not with tools, but with madness itself. The sagas tell of him as a man who sought new worlds guided not by compass, but by ravens, creatures sacred to Odin yet mischievous, like their namesake trickster god. Legend says that when he set out to discover Iceland, he carried 3 ravens with him. One flew back toward Norway, one circled aimlessly, and the third led him onward to new land. To the Vikings, this was no coincidence, but proof that Floki was favored by gods, or haunted by them. The truth, however, is less certain. Was it careful navigation, or divine guidance disguised as myth? As he worked, villagers often passed by, shaking their heads. His designs were not like the ships they knew. Too narrow, too curved, too fragile-looking to stand against the wrath of the waves. They mocked him openly. Floki built bird bones. They jeered. The sea will snap them like twigs. Others crossed themselves, muttering prayers to ward off evil, for his laughter echoed strangely in the night, a sound that seemed to belong more to spirits than to men. Yet he continued. Every failure, every broken frame only drove him deeper into obsession. He would sit for hours, staring at half-finished hulls, lips moving in whispered conversations with no one. At times, he would leap up suddenly, laughing, as if some invisible hand had pulled back the veil of mystery and revealed the answer. To his neighbors, this was proof of madness. But to Floki, it was revelation. He was not building ships as others did. He was birthing them, coaxing them into being from the bones of trees and the breath of his own will. Still, the question lingered. Was this genius or folly? The sagas painted him as Loki's kin, a trickster who delighted in both creation and destruction. But history suggests otherwise, that Floki's hand may have truly reshaped Viking shipbuilding, crafting vessels lighter and faster, able to skim the surface of the sea like ravens in flight. Which version was true? Perhaps both. One night, alone by the fire, Floki stared into the flames. The village was asleep, but he was awake, always awake, haunted by visions. His hands were blistered, his eyes rimmed with red, yet he smiled faintly. The sea is not my enemy, he whispered to the crackling logs. It is my mirror. To tame it, I must first understand myself. His laughter followed, soft at first, then rising, filling the empty night with a sound that made even the dogs outside whimper and tuck their tails. Floki knew well the line he walked, between man and God, between truth and myth, between genius and madness. And though the world called him a trickster, a fool, perhaps even a cursed soul, he carried within him the fire that could change the fate of the North. For only those who dare to dance with storms can ever hope to master them. And so the question grew like a shadow behind him. Would his creations carry his people to glory across the seas, or would they drag them into ruin? The sea did not answer. The sea never answers. It only waits. The fire in the longhouse burned low, painting the carved beams in shifting orange light. Outside, the night howled, a bitter wind carrying with it the salt of the sea. Floki sat near the embers, fingers blackened with tar and resin, his gaze lost in the flame, as if searching for answers the world refused to give. Around him, whispers grew louder each day. Some called him a genius. Others muttered he was cursed, touched by Loki the trickster, doomed to lead men into chaos. His ships, still strange to the eyes of many, were spoken of with both awe and fear. But the North had little time for doubts. The Vikings hungered. Each season, their ambition pushed them further across seas that cared nothing for man or myth. They needed ships, better, stronger, faster, and Ragnar Lothbrok, the restless warrior who sought to carve his name across kingdoms, turned at last to Floki. He studied the shipwright with wary eyes, knowing that genius and madness often walked hand in hand. "Your vessels look thin as bones," Ragnar said one cold morning by the fjord. "But if they can carry us beyond the horizon, then I will trust you. If they break—" He let the words hang, heavy as a blade at Floki's throat. Floki only smiled, his teeth flashing in the gray light. "Let them laugh at bones," he said softly, "for bones are the only thing that survives the grave." Yet even he knew his vision could not be brought to life alone. His work led him deeper into the forests, searching for trees that bent with grace, for timber that whispered of secrets waiting to be shaped. And there, in the silence between the pines, he met a man who would become both ally and shadow. Kettle was his name, though most spoke it only in whispers. A hermit, some said. A madman, others claimed. He lived on the edge of the village, speaking little, watching much. Where Floki laughed, Kettle was silent. Where Floki dreamed, Kettle listened. Their first meeting was cautious. Two wolves circling, measuring. "You hear the trees," Kettle said, his voice rough as bark. "You bend them to your will." Floki tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "No," he whispered. "I set them free. The sea is their destiny. I only remind them." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, the wind threading through branches above. Then Kettle nodded, slow, deliberate. "Then we will work together." From that day, they labored side by side. Where others mocked, Kettle watched without judgment. He taught Floki how to read the wood not as dead matter, but as living memory. How a knot could mean strength. How a curve could promise resilience. Their bond grew in fragments, built on respect rather than trust, for neither man fully revealed himself. But in the long hours of sweat and fire, they forged something between them that neither could name. Word of their work spread quickly. Shipwrights with hands hardened by tradition sneered as they watched Floki and Kettle bend planks in strange shapes, using methods that seemed closer to ritual than craft. "Fools," they muttered. "Madmen." Yet beneath their scorn, unease stirred, for in their hearts, they sensed what Floki built was unlike anything seen before. At last, the day of testing came. The ship rested on the shore like a sleeping beast, its hull sleek and narrow, its bow curved to cut the sea like a blade. Men gathered, whispering, some crossing themselves against evil, others curious to see whether Floki's madness would birth a marvel or a coffin. Ragnar stood at the water's edge, arms folded, his face carved in doubt. "This is your moment, shipwright," he said, his voice carrying across the hush of the crowd. "Prove your dream is not the death of men." The sky above groaned with storm. Dark clouds clawed across the horizon, lightning splitting the heavens into white scars. It was madness to sail, yet Floki leapt aboard with the grin of a wolf. "A ship is not tested in calm waters," he cried. Let the storm decide whether it lives or dies. A handful of men followed, drawn by loyalty or perhaps by the pull of fate. Kettle too stepped aboard, his silent presence grounding the fever in Floki's laughter. The ropes were cut, and the vessel lunged forward, swallowed by the maw of the sea. Waves rose like mountains, crashing upon the deck, drenching men to the bone. The ship groaned, straining, but did not break. Lightning tore the sky. Thunder roared like giants at war, and still Floki laughed, wild, unafraid, exulting in the chaos. He clung to the prow, eyes blazing, his voice rising above the storm. Dance with me, sea. Show me your rage. For a moment, it seemed the ship would not survive. A towering wave struck, lifting it high, threatening to hurl it into the depths. The men screamed, clinging to ropes, their knuckles white with terror. But the vessel twisted, slid along the waves back like a serpent slipping free. Where any other craft would have splintered, Floki's creation bent, flexed, and lived. Hours passed in a blur of fury and salt. At last, dawn broke, and the storm relented. The sea lay calm, its rage spent, and there on its surface floated Floki's ship, scarred, soaked, but whole. The men aboard sagged with relief, gasping, their faces pale. But Floki stood tall, water streaming from his hair, his grin wider than ever. He had not merely built a ship. He had birthed a creature that had survived the wrath of gods. On shore, silence fell. Then murmurs rose, disbelief giving way to awe. Some cheered, voices raw with wonder. Others whispered of curses, of dark pacts with Loki himself. Ragnar's lips curved in the faintest smile, though his eyes remained shadowed. "You've given us wings," he murmured, "but wings can burn in the fire of ambition." Floki leapt into the shallows, his laughter echoing like thunder. He had proven himself. Yet in victory, unease grew stronger. For in his triumph, there was something unsettling, something that blurred the line between man and myth. His laughter, wild and sharp, carried not only joy but something darker, a challenge to the gods themselves. That night, as the village feasted in his honor, Floki slipped away to the shore. The sea was calm, moonlight glimmering on its skin like silver. He knelt in the wet sand, eyes fixed on the horizon, lips moving in a whisper only the waves could hear. "Tell me who I am," he murmured. "Am I your master or your fool?" The sea, as always, gave no answer, only the slow, endless breath of the tide. The moon hung pale above the fjord, its reflection trembling in the black water. The feast fires had long since died, but Floki wandered restlessly, his mind gnawed by shadows that no celebration could banish. Praise rang in his ears like hollow echoes. He had built ships that defied storms, carried men to unknown lands, and earned Ragnar's grudging respect. Yet for every cheer, there was a whisper. For every hand raised in honor, another pointed with suspicion. "They say Loki guides your hand," an old woman hissed one morning as Floki passed. "Trickster blood in your veins, mischief in your bones." Floki only smiled, but her words sank deep. He was no stranger to the trickster god's name. Laughter had always been his shield, madness his cloak. But now, he wondered, did he laugh because he was free, or because he was cursed? Ragnar himself wrestled with doubts. The more his armies sailed on Floki's ships, the more victories they won, the greater the tension between them grew. Was Floki a brother, or a danger hidden behind a smile? In the hall, Ragnar's warriors praised the shipbuilder's genius, yet their eyes flickered with fear when he entered. Genius was useful, madness was dangerous, and Floki seemed to walk the razor's edge between them. Even Kettle, silent and steady, began to sense the storm gathering. One night, as they worked by torchlight, shaping a keel meant for conquest, Kettle broke his quiet. "They will turn on you," he said, his voice like stone grinding against stone. Floki looked up, his grin faltering. "Why? I gave them ships. I gave them the sea." Kettle's gaze was hard. "That is why. Men love gifts until they fear the giver." The word struck like a hammer. Floki laughed them off, but his heart twisted. He wanted to believe his work would bind him to his people, but the more they relied on him, the more they whispered of gods and curses. The breaking point came with betrayal. Not the grand betrayal of swords and shields, but the quiet kind, the kind that festers in corners. One raid had failed, the sea swallowing men and ships alike. Floki's designs had carried many to glory, but the loss of even one voyage was enough to stir doubt into fury. He plays with us. Men muttered. He is no builder. He is Loki's puppet. Ragnar summoned him to the hall. Shadows flickered across Ragnar's face, carved by firelight and care. You are my friend, he said, but his voice was heavy. And yet, I cannot ignore their fear. They believe you bring doom. Floki's laughter rang out, brittle and sharp. Doom. I gave them wings. Without me, they would still cower in their hovels, staring across the water, dreaming of lands they could never touch. And now they call me cursed. Ragnar's eyes softened, but only with sorrow. A man cannot be both savior and trickster. They will not forgive you for being both. The words hung in the hall like a death sentence. It was Kettle who guided Floki through the darkness that followed. Together, they worked on one final ship, unlike any before. Larger, leaner, faster. A vessel not for conquest, but for exile. The two men carved it in silence, their bond unspoken yet iron strong. Kettle's hands were steady, Floki's fevered, as if he poured every fragment of his soul into the wood. When it was finished, Floki stood before it, his heart heavy. It was beautiful, a serpent of the sea, hungry for horizons. Yet it felt less like a gift to men than a farewell to them. The night of departure came quietly. No crowd, no feast, only the hiss of the tide against the shore. Kettle stood beside him, the torchlight throwing deep shadows across his face. Where will you go? Kettle asked. Floki's eyes glittered. To where men cannot whisper. To where the sea does not judge. To where the gods themselves may reveal whether I am their trickster or their maker. Kettle laid a hand on the hull, as if blessing it. Then go. But remember, every myth is born from truth, and every truth becomes a myth. Floki climbed aboard, his movements deliberate, as though each step carried the weight of his soul. The ship slid into the black water, the oars dipping silently. He did not look back. The fjord swallowed him, the sea carrying him into shadow. Legends say he vanished into the waves, never to return. Some claimed he sailed to the edge of the world, building ships for gods instead of men. Others whispered he drowned, claimed at last by the sea he loved more than his kin. Still others swore his laughter could be heard in storms, echoing above the thunder. What is true? History records Floki as a master shipwright, a man whose designs changed the fate of the North. Without him, the Viking Age may have faltered before it began. His ships carried men across oceans, their dragon-prowed hulls striking terror in foreign lands. That much is fact. And yet, the sagas paint him with darker hues, Loki's kin, a trickster whose brilliance was touched by madness. They make him larger than life, a creature of storms and shadows, a man who blurred the line between human and myth. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Floki was both, a genius and a trickster, a savior and a curse. He gave his people the sea, and the sea took him in return. The waves whisper still of his name, carrying it across centuries. And in every storm-tossed voyage, in every creaking timber and crashing wave, perhaps a fragment of Floki's laughter remains, wild, unbroken, eternal.